Before the metaverse was a buzzword, Sega actually built it. They looked at what Disney was doing and asked a billion-dollar question: what if we built a theme park around our video games? The result was Sega World, a global chain of mega arcades, including a 7-floor temple to gaming packed with insane, one-of-a-kind rides. We're talking about Sega's R360, a simulator that spun you upside down while you played, the massive AS1, and a roller coaster called Rail Chase that ran in reverse through animatronic-filled temples. For a few glorious years in the 90s, the future felt like it had finally arrived. But dreams on that scale cost a fortune, and for a company already bleeding money from the console wars, these venues became a massive anchor that dragged them under. In this video, we're going deep inside the rise and fall of Sega's most ambitious project, taking a look at some of its unforgettable games and attractions. We'll then dissect Sega World's collapse and see where those lost attractions have ended up today. So if you've ever wondered about whether the magic of that era was as good as you thought, the real story gets even wilder. But before we jump in, we first have to understand why Sega even thought this was a good idea in the first place. To understand why Sega World existed, you have to remember what arcades were like before it. We're talking the early 80s, dark rooms, and sometimes the smell of cigarette smoke. It was the kind of place your parents warned you about. Sega, riding high on the success of Sonic the Hedgehog and coming off a decade of arcade dominance, had a radically different idea. They wanted to create an experience that was something shiny and new. They called it Sega World, and it became their flagship showcase of their entertainment empire. The first ones popped up in Japan, testing the waters under the name Joypolis, with many other Japanese locations to follow. But what I want to focus on today are a couple of their massive flagship locations outside of Japan. The first was opened in London in September 1996. This was the opposite of an ordinary arcade. This was the 7-floor, multi-story temple to gaming that spanned over 50,000 square feet. They later opened another behemoth in Sydney, Australia in 1997, spread across 3 massive levels. These venues were a completely different beast, and to understand why, we need to talk about what was actually inside of them. Now, in my previous videos, we talked about Sega's mastery of physical presence for their arcade motion cabinets. The idea that to create a memory that lasts, you have to engage the body. Sega World took that philosophy and expanded it into a building-size scale. It was the ultimate manifestation of Sega's creativity and technical ambition. So what made them special? It wasn't only the rows of Virtua Fighter and Daytona USA cabinets, though they had those too, including 8-player linked setups that we talked about in the earlier videos. The magic was in the innovation of the attractions inside. I mean, these places were testing grounds for Sega's most insane ideas. We're talking about the R360, the spinning terror we covered in the earlier video, a simulator that actually spun you a full 360 degrees while you played G-Lock Air Battle, and the monstrous AS1 game ride. But these, my friends, were just the beginning. Sega World London had those famous rocket escalators that would carry you up through this massive central atrium, giving you a glimpse of all of the attractions on every floor. It was designed to feel like stepping into a spaceship, which led you right into our first game. The Sega VR1 was a large-scale virtual reality motion simulator attraction in both the London and Sydney locations during the mid-90s, which actually debuted at the Yokohama Joypolis in 1994. As a premier high-tech entertainment attraction, it featured 4 hydraulic, 8-seater motion bases modeled on spaceship pods, allowing for 32 players to participate simultaneously in the immersive experience. Riders wore the specialized lightweight Mega Visor display headsets, which offered early 360-degree head tracking, 3D polygon graphics, and stereoscopic visuals, making it one of the most advanced VR experiences of its time. The primary software for the attraction, known as Space Mission, was a first-person rail shooter that placed riders in the role of pilots in a competitive scored game. Before each ride, attendants in spaceship-themed surroundings would present a pre-show to brief participants on the mission to reach the target planet. While in their moving pods, riders used trigger buttons to destroy enemy targets, with the highest scoring player receiving a Best Gunner badge. The VR1 was considered a highlight of Sega World arcades, showcasing a level of technology that was decades ahead of mainstream VR at home. But the real draw was the stuff you couldn't get anywhere else, and Sega World featured an attraction in Ghost Hunters, an interactive dark ride where you sat in a car and shot at 3D ghosts projected on screens. Think of it as a light hunt game, but you were physically moving through the environment. The ride used this clever augmented reality system where CGI ghosts were projected onto a transparent screen in front of you, blending with physical props and set pieces. And get this, the amount and type of ghosts would actually change depending on how well you were shooting. If you managed to defeat the final boss, a creature named Gorgon, the game would take your photo and print it out in a mock newspaper article declaring you a hero. I mean, they really thought of everything. And in Sydney, they had Rail Chase, a full-blown indoor roller coaster based on the arcade game, complete with a minecart theme, tunnels, and special effects. You'd start off thinking you were on a normal minecart ride through a temple, and then suddenly, you'd begin moving backwards through dark tunnels with flames and animatronics all around you. Just let that sink in for a second. You could play the original arcade game on a cabinet downstairs, and then you could walk upstairs and then ride the game in real life. It was meta before meta was even a thing. There was also Aquanova, a submarine motion simulator that had 16 different endings based on how well you played. 16 endings in an arcade ride? The game tracked your performance and changed the experience accordingly. If you did well, you'd get one ending, and if you messed up, you'd get another. It was ambitious, it was expensive, and it was absolutely mind-blowing to a 10-year-old. Sadly, it's virtually impossible to find much footage of the ride itself, so for those who have actually experienced riding this one, be sure to drop a comment below to let the community know what it was really like. And with all these great games and experiences, here's the thing I haven't mentioned yet. Getting into Sega World wasn't like walking into a regular arcade. You didn't just wander in for free and spend your money on tokens. You paid an entry fee just to get through the doors. Then you'd queue up for rides, wait in lines like a theme park, and experience everything on an all-day wristband model. It was a fundamental shift in how arcades worked, and that model created some interesting problems. And the price was the problem. These places cost an absolute fortune to run. We're talking about facilities packed with custom-built, one-of-a-kind electromechanical attractions that require dedicated maintenance teams, specialized parts, and constant technical support, and required a constant stream of visitors just to keep the lights on. But here's what you might not realize. Those rides were breaking down constantly. The Ghost Hunter ride, the AS1 simulator, the VR1 experience. And when they broke, you had angry visitors who'd paid an entry fee and were now standing in line for nothing. It's important to remember the context here. The late 90s were a turbulent time for Sega. The Saturn console was struggling against the PlayStation in ways we've covered before. The company was bleeding money, hundreds of millions of dollars in losses, and these massive, expensive theme parks, which were supposed to be their answer to Disney, suddenly became a massive financial anchor around the company's neck. And despite the London Sega World later changing its pricing instead to a pay-per-play model, they sadly closed their doors in 1999. The Sydney location held on a little longer, hoping that the 2000 Olympics would bring in the crowds they desperately needed. But it didn't work. They shut down in November 2000. The building then sat empty for years. It was used as a furniture showroom for a while, and was eventually demolished in late 2008. Just like that, the dream was over. So, if the big ones are gone, can you still visit a Sega World today? The short answer is no. Well, at least not under that name and not in that form. So for a long time, the Sega World brand lingered in smaller arcades across the UK, but these were a shadow of the London flagship. The final, definitive end came in Japan. Between 2020 and 2022, Sega sold off its entire arcade management business to another company called Genda Inc. Places that had carried the Sega World or Club Sega name for decades were systematically rebranded to a new name, Gigo. It stands for Get Into the Gaming Oasis. It just doesn't have the same ring to it, does it? The last Sega World arcade was in Taiwan and also rebranded to Gigo in late 2023. After more than 50 years of Sega arcades, the name had finally disappeared from storefronts. But here's where it gets interesting for us. While the Sega World name is gone, the artifacts still remain. See, for years, there were rumors about what happened to the massive Sonic the Hedgehog statue that greeted visitors at the London Sega World. It was a huge part of the experience. A 12-foot-tall, smiling Sonic in that classic pose, standing guard over the entrance. And for a long time, it was thought to have been lost or destroyed, scrapped along with everything else when the building was redeveloped. But in 2019, someone found it. It was sitting in a storage facility, battered and worn, but very much alive. A group of fans and preservationists got together and funded a full restoration. And in 2023, the same year that the last Sega World disappeared, that statue found a new home. It now stands proudly in the lobby of the Sega Europe headquarters in Brentford, London. A piece of that childhood wonder preserved for the employees who carry the company's legacy forward. It's a fitting metaphor, really. The physical Sega Worlds are gone, but the memory and a few precious artifacts still live on. So why do we still care about Sega World? Why does a chain of video game theme parks that barely lasted 4 years still have us talking about them decades later? Well, my view is that it was proof that the future could be fun. It was the place where the line between playing a game and living inside of it completely disappeared, where you could race in Daytona, USA, then ride a roller coaster, and get inside a massive AS1 theater experience, all within the same building. Now, today we have VR headsets that can transport us anywhere. We have home theater systems that rival commercial cinemas. But there's something about the sheer, unapologetic scale of those Sega World arcades that remains unmatched. They were monuments to a specific time and place, the moment when arcades were still king, and where to draw a crowd, you had to innovate and build a technical spectacle you couldn't get anywhere else. It's the feeling of walking through those doors, the sight of that giant Sonic, the rumble of rail chase through your bones, the shared glance with a friend as you both realized you were somewhere really unique and special. And that's something no home console, no matter how powerful, can ever truly replicate. If you ever visited the London Trocadero or the Sydney flagship locations, I'd love to hear your memories. What was your favorite ride? Did you make it onto the R360? Drop your stories in the comments below. I'm genuinely curious to hear what stuck with you, and I read every single one. And if this throwback into Sega's most ambitious dream hit the spot, then hitting that like button is the best way to let me know. And if you're new here, welcome. We're all about exploring gaming's most fascinating eras, one experience at a time. Subscribe now so you don't miss what comes next. Alright my friends, this is the Retro Gaming Boss signing out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.